Thanks for listening to Fluff and Crunch, where we talk about the connection and sometimes disconnect between system, setting, and story in tabletop RPGs.
You have a good holiday then?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I forgot you had a holiday.
Yeah, well, no, but here's the vacation. We translate from the British English to the American English. Did you get any gaming done in the last week and some and two?
No, we haven't been able to sort of match up our schedules. We keep having weeks where one of us is doing, well, probably there's a whole bunch of nights we got to, so it's mostly the Thursdays or Fridays.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think me and Brian have played a few games of Marvel Miniatures game, but we haven't been able to meet Scott for about 3 weeks. So yeah, we haven't planned what we were going to play next, and I printed all the stuff up, and then haven't managed to do it. And I don't think we will this week either, potentially. So.
These things happen.
Yeah,
these things happen.
Have you managed any? You've been back
actually, this last Saturday night we got together and we had one person gone, so we just did another one-off of Castles and Crusades to continue our familiarization with it. And it's a fascinating system. I know we'll come back to it when I've run it some more properly, but I like in the rules are light. It's not like super crunchy. It's not very, as you would say, gamey, like, I mean, some versions of 2D20 are like that because there are a lot of moving rules parts that you can fiddle with. There's not a whole lot like that in Castles and Crusades, but in a lot of ways, it's almost like British English to American English. Like it seems like, oh, it's the same thing, maybe, but it's really not. There are, and I mean, comparing it to like D20 or 5e, I'm starting to realize there are a lot of subtle differences beneath the hood that are that come into being because of the mechanical differences. But the mechanical differences, when you look at them, they're like, oh, that's not that big of a difference. But they have what seems like pretty big implications in gameplay. But it runs smoothly. Running it on the GM side is very easy. So yeah, did another one off of that. We're going to do another one probably next weekend, and then the last weekend in October, we will start our campaign for real. I want to give people opportunities to play with the rules enough so that when they make their characters or finalize their characters or think they have that, they understand we all understand what they're doing. So several weeks ago, we talked about the essential elements of Joe.
Yep.
And now we need to talk about how we would do a better set of rules. Do you have the G.I. Joe rule book?
Yeah, wait a minute. Look, I'll show you the G.I. Joe rule book. There we go. There's
oh, there you go. Ha. Yeah, and
there's my G.I. Joe rule book.
I have the G.I. Joe, the GM's guide here too.
Yeah. Isn't that funny that we've already got the system?
Funny thing, huh?
I mean, in all seriousness, we already have a military 2D20 game. There's things I would tweak. There's one thing I would tweak quite a lot, but with the exception of that one thing I would tweak quite a lot, I think it's going to be little tweaks. There's only one thing I would sort of make any big tweak. And I don't think I'd even do massive tweak into I mean, you wouldn't probably have magic, but I mean, we've got this, all right, other side. Got this spirit guy here. So,
Yep.
He probably does stuff which is borderline magic-y. And you have things like was like Cobra Summon. I can't remember, he's like Serpentor or something, who's like kind of like a clone, but then he's also like a clone with like sort of like other powers. So
yeah,
it'd be relatively easy to push it into some more mystical. I mean, you wouldn't go, full on acting Cthulhu, but if you wanted to push into those elements, they'd fit
Yeah.
so easily in G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
So
let's start where you like to start, which I'm on board with this now, is let's start with character creation. So you're saying not only use, like say the SRD, which is, I think, 2-part Star Trek Adventures, 1-part Achtung Cthulhu-ish in terms of like the degree of rules crunch. It's a little closer because of the more streamlined list of skills and things like that. You're saying just start with Achtung Cthulhu period.
Yeah.
I
Yes.
agree. Same we'll talk attributes and skills.
So I'm
Keep
looking at
those.
so skills. I mean, skills we'll look through quickly because it's very quick to go through and go that doesn't make sense. But actually, I don't think we change a lot. So agility, brawn, coordination, insight, reason, will. Yeah, the obvious one that's missing from there for when you're doing into other systems is like charisma.
Yeah,
there's no real charisma kind of thing. But then you look at GI Joe and go, well, there's not a huge amount of charisma coming into things. There might be talents that you need to do stuff with, but how often is charisma an actual thing when it isn't
well,
covered by someone's talent or
you could, I
something,
think that you
or a skill?
could, yeah, you could use will. I mean, the idea of,
Yeah.
say, you're trying to, get people to follow you. Well, that's your force of will.
Exactly.
You're trying to infiltrate something, pretend someone you're not. That's your focus in you coming across. So your will is like your kind of catch-all for those things.
Yeah.
I'm fine with keeping the attributes the way they are. I don't think there's any reason to change them.
So then our skills, I think it's my case. There's one I don't think is relevant. So we got academia, athletics, engineering, fighting, medicine, observation, persuasion, resilience, stealth, survival, tactics, vehicles. Now, I don't think we need academia because the whole point of Cthulhu is that you're good,
Yeah.
you're going to do the research and the occultism and stuff. So that's possibly not as important. I do think you need a more modern tech thing. So I think you need some kind of because if we look at what engineering is covering, architecture, combat engineering, it has electronics, but explodes. That's mostly it's more mechanical engineering. I feel like you need something which can cover sort of computers and electrical.
I think you could just dump academia and you could replace it with technology.
Technology. The other thing I never like, but this one we always disagree on, is I think where G.I. Joe is going to be super combat heavy, I wouldn't really like fighting to be one skill. I'd rather have it split between ranged and melee. But it's one of those things which would be personal choice. It wouldn't matter either way.
Yeah, but what's our personal choice today? I think you're onto something. I think that, sure, Snake Eyes carried an Uzi. But who didn't in the 1980s?
I mean, Snake Eyes would, if you have one fighting stat, then Snake Eyes is the one that you go, oh yeah, fair. Snake Eyes can do everything. Okay, but most of the others are either better at ranged or they're better at melee.
My point was, though, that even though he carried an Uzi, he's all about the hand-to-hand and the melee. And I wouldn't split. I would say melee is unarmed and armed.
Yeah.
I would just split it into ranged and melee. And then you make use of focuses as they make use of focuses. And under ranged, you could nest things like heavy weapons or like crew served weapons under that. If you want to, I think the fact that
the focus list in the Achtung Cthulhu rulebook is going on to a second line is almost saying, actually, there's too many focuses here already.
That's a good point.
I think the difference in Achtung Cthulhu is it's not meant to be all about the combat. It is meant to be, you've got this whole Cthulhu element to it. I think if I was playing Achtung Cthulhu and was playing just a straight up war game, I think I'd already be thinking maybe we should split fighting in two.
Yeah.
Anyway.
But you know what? If we dump academia and we replace it with technology, then we just add we split fighting into melee and ranged weapons, then all we're doing is adding a total of one skill.
Exactly.
I don't think actually when considering for character generation, like how many points you'd get to put into skills, maybe you give someone for like basic training, everybody gets like an extra point in either melee or ranged weapons, just to reflect like the military background of everyone who's on the Joe team.
And the rest of our skill list, fine, but medicine, observation, persuasion, resilience, stealth, survival, tactics, vehicles. You can literally look at the characters above me and start picking, like, Spirit, he's really good at survival. Wild Bill, he's really good at vehicles. Stalker, he'd be tactics, a bit of survival and stealth. Snake Eyes is all about the fighting and the stealth. Flint's our leader guy, so he's going to have tactics, probably observation. Covered Girl's going to have persuasion. This is perfect. We can make every character we want.
And I'm looking at the character sheet, the official character sheet for Achtung Cthulhu, and name, nationality, rank. I think that I think that you could, like with archetypes, you could come up with a handful of archetypes using the ones that are already in Achtung
Yeah,
Cthulhu.
that's the one where I would have said I was going to change the most. I think your backgrounds stay almost exactly the
Yeah,
same,
yeah,
because some of the whole point of this is some of these backgrounds are the military
yep,
backgrounds, but some of them aren't.
right. And that's
You have
part
these
and
back.
that's part of the flavor of these characters that are not only it's not only flavor text, but it provides something. It shows up sometimes in the story and
Yeah.
is therefore has some kind of mechanical representation.
So I'm looking at the slide, and it's like the second page of the background. We've got covert operative, criminal, driver, engineer, entertainer,
Yeah.
journalist. And you think, yeah, all of those would work as GI Joe
Yep.
backgrounds.
Air
Um,
Force, Army,
we've got
pilot.
the
Yeah.
standard, the different things, but then we've got all this other. We've got spiritual leader, which is
Yeah.
where like this is perfect. Yeah, I think the archetypes is where I'd want to do more work, because the archetypes in Act of Cthulhu are very much
Right.
designed for Cthulhu. So we have Boffin, that doesn't work. We have Commander. Your Commander's great. Con artist, that's not so much. Grease monkey,
Yeah. That would
maybe that
work.
needs tweaking. Infiltrator is fine, but then we have investigator, so that's like
Mm,
no, that doesn't really work.
probably not.
Occultist, again, not soldier. Well, they're all soldiers, so you don't really want a. We really need that one needs splitting up
Although, I
into.
mean, if you go back to the original selection, and I'm going back way far here, if we go back to the original selection of characters, one of them was Grunt,
Yeah,
which is about as basic as you could
yeah.
get, just an infantryman.
So I think because there's probably more of a focus of uh kind of the military aspects, I think we'd
Yeah.
want to have more than soldier. So we probably we'd want like heavy, or a scout, or you'd want different arc. But really, I think that's we've already fixed skills. We've removed one, added another one. That's it. I think the archetypes would need changing. So I think you need
Uh,
archetypes more on sort of the role you expect them to play,
yeah.
maybe
Well, taking
with
a
some different
look,
talents. I like ninja could be an archetype, for example.
yeah, taking a look in Serpent and Sands book, there's a selection of about nine, I believe it is. Yeah, nine or eight, no, seven. What, I can't count. Six. There we go. New new archetypes, including the adventurer, which is kind of a
That'd be good.
catch-all that could
Yeah,
work. Diplomat, not so much. Gambler, not so much. Guide, probably not. Smuggler, probably not. Spy would
spy
work.
works. Yeah.
And then they have some new backgrounds, although those are mainly related to um, what's it called? They're mainly related to North Africa. But I think that you could pull something like they have the long range desert group officer and soldier. They have some other backgrounds in there that I think that you could pirate things from pretty easily. Um,
But I think that's really the only place that in character creation you really need to really deviate from what's in Act of Cthulhu, just because of the focus of Cthulhu
yeah,
isn't the same as the focus of GI Joe. Therefore,
you
we,
might
we
have some
can't just have.
supernatural stuff come up as a random, like, keep your players guessing kind of thing. But you're right, that's obviously not the focus of Joe's
Yeah.
stories.
And so then I think, and the weird thing is having the backgrounds as being sort of civilian backgrounds and then joining the Joes, that's fine. But
Works.
having then the archetypes be as what looks like a civilian archetype, that doesn't
Yeah,
really work. Once they've joined GI Joe, they're essentially now in the military.
yeah.
So we need more, we need specialist roles. But you wouldn't need a lot. You could probably get away with sort of 6 different, something along the lines of, you need a vehicle guy, you need like a sneaky guy, you need like a heavy weapons or explosive guy, your standard soldier, a specialist, a commander, and then just throw in ninja as well, because that's
Sure, why
probably
not?
got everything covered.
You know
Or like
what
a
though?
kind of an infiltrating spy talking to people thing. So yeah, you're talking maybe 8 archetypes. It's
Yeah.
not wouldn't
I
be
think
difficult.
the easy way, and this is coming from an army vet, is just branches. You've got infantry, you have armor, you have artillery, you have air defense artillery, you have military intelligence.
Yeah,
There's cavalry, which covers both land and air cav, which is helicopters. You could just go through
yeah.
and take those and create archetypes based on those to represent like the foundation of a soldier who's from that branch. You could do the same thing with the Navy.
Yeah, I mean, making up archetypes is easy. If you're looking at it, they all give you 6 points of attribute boosts. I'm looking at this looks like 9 points of skills, 2 focuses, a talent, some belongings, and then they will give you 3 talents. Well, the talents you could probably rip off the talents from the existing ones,
Sure.
or failing that, you can make up your own talents, because making up your own talents is, relatively
I
easy.
think the thing to do here, you could take one of two routes. If you wanted to use 2d20 for GI Joe, you could take one of two routes. I think you could either sit down and create archetypes based on the different characters, with the assumption that players will create their own Joes. Okay,
Yeah.
you could do that, and like you just said, each archetype mechanically is worth the same. So you have a model already. You could also make your life really easy if you're not going to have the character, if your players, the intention is not for the players to create original Joes to play. If the intention is for your players to play existing Joes, then you just sit down and say, okay, I have this many points for an archetype. I have this many points, and these are the kinds of things that come into a background. Let's model Snake Eyes, or let's model Roadblock, or whoever. Let's model Scarlet, Lady J, whatever, and just take a look at what are these different characters? What do they do? What do they do well? What are they known for? And I think that you could very quickly, very easily come up with a list of make a bunch of characters that would work.
But yeah, I'm with you. Even if you were getting people to make up their own, there's no reason you can't just say, this is the amount of points you get for your skills and attributes, and you get a talent, and just let people pick without having to have it. The only real thing that archetypes are doing, beyond the fact that they give you like a framework, is that they have archetype specific talents.
Yes.
And that's really it. So it's the kind of thing you go, right, well, you make your stats, whatever, and you get to pick one talent from any one of the existing archetype only talents that's going to match the character you're going for. Well, that's fine then.
But then beyond that, we have a model again and again and again as to what are the different things mechanically a talent consists of, and what does it do. And so if there's something that a given Joe does for which there isn't an existing talent, I think coming up with one would be easy. I think that the issue, I mean, would you be more inclined, if you were wanting to play GI Joe with 2d20, would you be more inclined to have a party of custom made original Joes, or would you rather go with the existing ones?
It's funny. I want to do an episode on similar to this somewhere. I think I'd rather do custom Joes and have the other ones be as NPCs. But at the end of the day, it's the kind of thing that would kind of depend on your players. Because if your players go, well, I really want to play Snake Eyes, Scarlet, and Roadblock, then let them.
It's funny because I'm usually the one who's like, I remember when the first Marvel superheroes game came out, decades ago, and I was like, wait, you have to play one. I don't want to play. I want to make my own character. Actually, in this, I would rather just play an existing Joe. Like, give me Gung Ho over your left shoulder there, or whoever, whatever. So I would be more inclined to just create Joes from the existing roster. There it is.
I think the problem with GI Joe is that everyone wants to be Snake Eyes.
No.
Well, all right, a lot of people want to be Snake Eyes. I think you're Transformers.
I'm different like that.
Most people have their famous Transformer, but I feel when it comes to like GI Joe, so many people like the favorite case. It's like how for so long in like Marvel Comics, Wolverine was pushed front and center.
Totally.
It's like there was this ridiculous time period where like Wolverine is like he's on like 2 X-Men teams, and he's in the Avengers, and
everywhere.
He's got 2 of his own comics, and you're like,
enough.
Okay, I know he's really old and he can regenerate, but he can't be everywhere at once.
Yeah.
This makes no sense.
No, it gets tiring.
But yeah, I think then Wolverine kind of got oversaturated. But I mean, then they did the same thing in the films. They did a bunch of films where they just put it's the Wolverine story.
Yeah.
And then he got his own films. And then they did the new ones. And then they still pushed him. And you're like, oh, I like Wolverine. And Hugh Jackman's really good at him. But there are other X-Men characters.
Yes, there are. And there are other Joes. Like where
there are many.
Because like I said, I always go back to the original. I think there were either 10 or 12 Joe figures.
Yeah.
And and Gung Ho, Scarlet, and like Scarlet got totally eclipsed by Lady J. Like when the cartoon came out. Anyway, bitch and moan about that some other day. I'm inclined to play the Joes that exist. Let me ask you this really quickly, and I think I know the answer already. But things like a combined stress track and mental and physical wounds being differentiated within that, courage, armor, uh, 3 injuries. I think all but the injuries, I think, just go with straight Achtung Cthulhu. There's just
Yeah, because
there's
I
no
was
good
going to ask you
reason
the
to
same thing.
change.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I think because you have courage and armor, that is giving you the 2 elements
Yeah.
to it. So I don't think you really do. And actually, GI Joe is quite pulpy. If
Yeah.
anything, I think the single stress check I think suits GI Joe better than I think it suits Achtung Cthulhu to some extent. I think part of the reason they did it in Cthulhu is they did want you to kind of just, when it was, whether it was like mental damage or physical damage, they wanted to use the same stress check
Yeah.
to
It's
show that
also
they were
easier to
combining.
manage.
It is a lot easier.
Do you
But
think though that 3 injuries,
no, I
given, I
think you
mean,
probably
here's the
need,
hard thing. Given how 2D20, I mean, there is definitely the thumb is on the scale in favor of the characters. Like it's pretty hard to really like kill a character dead. So do you think? I mean, Conan is 5.
I'd probably go back to I'm used to 5. I was surprised when you told me that Cthulhu was only 3, and I
How
was
about
just like,
4?
what? Well, it doesn't really matter, does it? But
Go 4.
I mean, it's a dial, isn't it? It's a dial of
Sure.
what you want your game to be like. If you want your character to be that much more survivable, then you go 5.
Okay.
Or you go 4 and say there's a talent that lets you go to. I feel like, so you look at this and you think, okay, it should be, these are normal humans, it should be 4.
Yeah.
But I feel like Roadblock, he should get 5.
Yeah. Actually, you know what? I like that. That would be a good, I mean, plenty of games have that, like a feat in various versions of D&D that gives you an extra like hit point or 2 per level or something like that. And Star Trek Adventures, I believe, has a talent. Does it? Maybe. Anyway.
I think usually what you have is you think your stress tracks are longer. So,
Yeah.
but having an extra wound, it's like, it's not game breaking.
Right. And to gobble up a talent use
Yeah.
up a talent for something that is a signature trait or a signature quality of the character. Like, yeah, I agree. Roadblock is going to be able to take more of a beating than, some, even Snake Eyes takes a beating. So, okay, maybe default to like 3 to 5, depending on how you want to do things. Okay. What next? I mean, we haven't nailed down, we haven't provided people with specific examples and details and stuff, but that's our direction as to how to deal with it.
Yeah.
What next?
I mean, the most of the combat stuff works same. Because I don't know the rules well. Oh, that's what I was looking for, is the ammo. Yeah,
ammo doesn't run out.
It's a salvo's different, isn't it? Salvo adds qualities to your gun. It doesn't give you like rapid fire, or does it?
Well, I mean, you would just.
Oh, you go area. So yeah,
different weapons have different effects that are triggered by a salvo. That's fine.
And I just look at it because I'm used to an Infinity where like you have essentially you have a salvo rate, but in Infinity the salvo rating is you can spend ammo to get that many. I think it might be extra D20 on your attack roll.
I mean, having like your standard, maybe the salvo does more damage. I
quite like that. I think it works really well for like your machine guns and stuff, where your salvo basically gives you the area.
Yeah, that makes
quality.
Sense.
So you basically spend ammo and you just like destroy a whole area. Whereas on the single things, you're doing more damage. So I think that works well. It's quite a nice little rule, and it also means if you want to stick in other like cool equipment that's not in here, you've got a way of doing it already, which is like you're going to use the ammo to give you whatever things.
One thing that I would do though with weapons is I would go through and I would choose from each of the weapon tables maybe 2 weapons to be representative of. Like, this is the standard weapon. Yeah. This is the standard rifle. This is because nobody, I mean, outside of, nobody talks about like what kind of machine gun Roadblock carries. Not that I know of,
Well, it'll be an M60.
Well, he has a machine gun. Okay. And that by itself, machine gun, differentiates it from the typical, blue laser rifle that everybody else carries. So you really just need, for the Joes, a submachine gun, a rifle.
Yeah,
a machine gun. Like you just pick the representative one, and then
Yeah,
if
you need to
someone
run
has a
through the list
signature
and
weapon, you just
rename
tweak
them.
it.
Because obviously all of these guns are World War II era guns, and we want guns from like the
Well, who
80s
cares?
and the 90s. But really, all you're doing is changing the names.
Yeah.
The what they do is going to be the same.
Yeah.
But that's basic. I mean, the main difference is this has a whole, there's a whole table of rifles. People don't really use rifles anymore. Like if you're using a rifle, it's a sniper rifle.
Right. Right.
But we would have submachine and machine guns. So,
I said you just go through and you just pick the represent, and maybe just for the sake of a little bit of variety, maybe you pick the standard Joe submachine gun, and standard Joe assault rifle, and then you pick you either pick a different one because the information's already different for you, or you just differentiate it a little bit, change the quality, maybe change what the salvo effect is for your standard Cobra weapon.
Yeah. And then I mean, that's the only thing I think you need to do then is that there's that other equipment, you might want to add in weird laser guns and bizarre machines that you just have to stack them up. There's rules of vehicle now, obviously G.I. Joe's famous having kind of like, Cobra Hiss tanks and all these weird things. These are just things that you might need. Well, I'm going to have to write the stats for this because I can't actually just take a bog standard thing because a Hiss tank has, I don't know, flamethrowers, whatever else it has. But, how many of them do you really need? It's not like you need to day one stat 30 different vehicles.
There's nothing stopping you from saying, okay, the Cobra Hiss tank is the standard Cobra tank. Okay. Yeah. So either you decide, is that a Panzer Mark III or a Mark IV?
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, like it does not matter.
No, that's what you use as starting point. You'd use the existing vehicles.
Yeah.
And to make it easier, you'd use the Allies as G.I. Joe, and you'd use
that's it.
You'd use the Germans as as Cobra, and just to give you a starting point. And you can just relabel them. No one's going to know.
No, it won't matter.
There's going to be some weird ass vehicles that you need to be other stuff, but it's probably not an issue. But you got something to work on. Does the starting book not have planes in it? Is it just tanks?
It's just ground vehicles.
Oh. Are there aircraft or like sea vehicles in anything?
I think that there are some sea vehicles. I know in at least one of the adventures there are stats for a German E-boat, but
I'm just looking through this. So where's my Spitfires and Mustangs and Messerschmitts?
Nope. There are some air assets spread throughout, but yeah, I think that. Yeah, you take what is, you reskin. We've talked about that before. There's no sense in creating new because it's not going to matter. You just need some degree of like what's the foundation for, okay, we're using a helicopter. What basic stats would the character interact with to make it work versus a Cobra trouble bubble when they fight each other in the sky? That's it. That's what it's called, trouble bubble.
Yeah,
I don't know what its actual name is. It's an acronym.
I'm sure that's what they're actually called.
No, that's not its real name.
Oh, right.
I think that was someone calling it that. That was a colloquialism. Anyway, so you mentioned earlier about spells and arcana and weird things like that. I think that the psychic powers would be really easy to incorporate if you wanted to do that. Yeah. So for me, that's just like that. That's easy. The explanation of American occult stuff being more rooted in psychic powers, ESP and stuff like that, that if you wanted to have that, that's an easy inclusion.
Well, I think I've had someone go for like, the cheesy example that's over here and go, I want my Native American guy to do Native. I mean, actually, when we last played Cthulhu, one of Scott O'Brien went, I want my character to be Native American.
Yeah, I remember you saying
be
that.
able to do magic. And I was like, well, there isn't any, but I think we just took the Celtic spell book because that looked.
Yeah,
it might have one of them. We either took the Celtic spell book or the runic spell book, and we just changed the names of the spells.
Yeah,
it's not likely a cat person will want to do that in G.I. Joe, but if someone wanted to, it'd be like,
it's there.
Whatever. It's not, it's not the end of the world. Just like the psychic one's good. And by the same thing, it's probably if it's a GM decision, it's when you have a conversation with your players. Do we want to have kind of magic and or psychic powers or mythical stuff in? Yes or no? Everyone goes, no, I just want straight up military. You don't do any of this stuff.
Yep.
And if they say they do, then you go, all right, cool. Well, there's because it's not like it's overpowered magic. People aren't throwing around massive
No.
fireballs. It's it
Now,
is meant to.
what about? I was thinking about this before we hopped on. Any other like big picture mechanical like meta differences? Because we know that 2D20 has a significant meta layer in terms of the meta currencies. I think that momentum, threat, and fortune could be used in all the same ways that they are used. I don't think there's any need to change those. However, that means change meaning like change that which is done. How many points? What do you get for for a momentum or 2 momentum or whatever? I don't think there need to be any changes with that. But I am considering. I've been thinking about an addition that could maybe be like a fortune spend. And maybe this is ridiculous or a little campy, and you can tell me to shut up if you think that's the case. But I kind of think that there should be something that the Joes can do to invoke the inherent backbiting and organizational instability within Cobra. Because
I like that.
At some point or another, like Dr. Mindbender is pissed off at the Baroness, and Destro is pissed off because the Baroness isn't giving him attention or something like that. I think there could be something, a spend, maybe a fortune spend, maybe only once per session, that a player could make that would invoke something that would maybe increase the difficulty or do something to potentially stymie Cobra's plans.
So bear in mind, you can already spend 2 momentum to establish a new truth.
True.
So I kind of think then what you're doing is you're kind of thinking this has got to be a bit beyond this, because like you said, a truth increases the difficulty of like an action.
Yes.
By 1. But what you're trying to do here is like increase the difficulty of like lots of actions
for like a scene.
For like a whole scene by 1. But a fortune spend sounds, you're creating a truth, but it's like a global truth. It's not like like truths are meant to be, like it says, location, situational, personal. This is, it's a scene truth, which is, Cobra infight. I think it's a great idea. You spend a fortune and you increase the difficulty, or you do want to, you create a truth, but it's just the truth has a bigger range to it. It's not a small thing. It's I think that's a great idea. I think another one actually on that subject should be, you should be able to, because I can't see it on here, and you can do it. I think you should be able to spend a fortune to just have like one of the big, like a vehicle, just like, my tank is just there.
Right.
Or that kind of thing. Or you crash one and there's another one just, but it's fine because my helicopter is just here. Something like that.
All of a sudden, like, a dust cloud is on the horizon and the cavalry arrives, and, you've got another vehicle to jump. What is that? It's not Shield's helicarrier, obviously, but doesn't G.I. Joe, I know they have, what is it? The USS Flag, which is a giant,
just a big boat, don't they?
Isn't that it? That's a ship, actually.
It's an aircraft carrier.
There's a difference. Is it the USS Flag? Is it? Am I getting that right?
No, I think that's right. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's one of the
in the middle of the desert, but yeah.
No, you're right about that. That's true. But don't they have a flying something around?
I feel like you should just retcon it that it is basically a helicarrier, that it can just fly.
No, it has giant tank treads. That would be awesome.
Well, it's not the most mobile of things, though, is it? Because it still has to come up over like the sea. Come out.
Right. It just like drives up on the beach, and it smashes the mini golf course that invariably is next to the beach, in the little curio shops, t-shirt shops, and then drives off and kicks ass somewhere.
Yeah, I think Shield had the right idea with the helicarriers.
No, I think the giant tank carrier would be better. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like, what it is? You're right. The spending momentum to create a trait is already there, but I think codifying this to fit the property makes sense, and make it a fortune spend, and say it's like once per session per player.
Yeah.
So that you're not limiting it, but it's a more costly spend. Speaking about fortune, how many would you provide? I think probably 2.
I mean, this gives 3, which is like kind of like, wow, that's
I think
a
2
lot.
per session.
I think 2 beginning with 2 is probably a good idea. I think I'm surprised that it says 3 in Cthulhu. Like if it had said 1, I
Yeah,
would
that's
have been
not.
like, that makes sense to me. The fact that you start with 3 in Cthulhu makes me feel like you could
Yeah.
just, yeah. I am genuinely surprised.
Another thing I would do is with thinking about injuries and stress track is you are taken out. You are not killed. I think like in Star Trek, when you use lethal force in Star Trek, you give the GM threat. I think because nobody gets killed, at least in like original, nobody gets killed.
No,
I
people don't
think
get
that
injured.
when you sustain 3 injuries, you are taken out, you are defeated. Um, and I think that killing, like if a Joe kills, I think there should be a mechanical and a story penalty. Maybe even like a moral scar that you take. Joes don't kill, you know what I mean? Joe will let the bad guy go, let him escape instead of blowing their head off.
It's a weird one, isn't it? Because they mow down like the Cobra soldiers left, right, and center. But yeah, they're probably like after the battle, they probably all get up and walk
I think
away
so.
again.
But look, when you watch the cartoon, any and every plane that gets shot, there's always a dude whee, out of it with a parachute. Always.
Yeah, I'm not sure how it goes in the comics, but it's one of those things that they just they mow down people left, right, and center. But are they dead? It's irrelevant.
I
They're
don't
off
think so.
screen, and
They're
the
defeated.
named bad guys, yeah, they never die ever.
No.
They, like you said, they always get captured. It's
Right.
like Batman, except
Yep.
Batman makes a thing of it. I don't think GI Joe they specifically say they're not killing people. They're just like they're being defeated. They're not
Yep.
dead, and then you put them in Joe prison where Storm Shadow can break them out.
Exactly. I think that I don't have the idea nailed down, but I think that if a Joe chooses to use lethal force, you could adopt the rule from Star Trek Adventures, which I forget how many, but it adds threat. You
Right.
immediately give the GM threat when you choose to use lethal force, like you put your phaser on disintegrate or murderify or whatever. I think that if you do something that would likely kill a character, then you do that. And I think probably if you're doing it knowingly, there's I don't know, maybe you
Well, at
force
the end of
them
the day,
to.
they're soldiers, so
Yeah, but it's
like
GI Joe.
it is. But you know what I mean? Like, so no, what I was going to say is that if you count the fact that right, so you've shot them, but they're not dead, and then you go up to them, at that point, they're essentially your prisoner. So if you just finish them off, you're essentially killing an unarmed prisoner, which is like,
Yeah, no bueno.
yeah, I think I'm sure you could put in both, like you said, both a story and a mechanical penalty for, yeah, trying to off Destro. At
Yeah,
least Destro has a son though, so he's got to get out.
he does.
But yeah, I'm pretty sure Destro has a son.
I have a GI Joe comic book that I picked up like on sale somewhere years ago. It's like a combined, has several volumes in it. It's like volume whatever and has several episode or issues in it. And it depicts Cobra Commander as having been a used car salesman in the 1970s who decides, like, out of his egomaniacal nature, that he needs to be in charge of everything. And there's a drawing of some dude with a bad mustache, and that was Cobra Commander when he was selling cars. It's so strange.
It is very
Anyway,
weird.
um, are there any other are there any other? Oh, and you could use, if you wanted to have, if you didn't want to have to create something to deal with the moral fallout of, like putting a pill in Destro's head, and that you could just use the mental scars table in Achtung Cthulhu
Yeah, that's a good one.
as the penalty for killing, not capturing, with the guarantee of the person being sprung later. Is there anything else that someone would have to consider mechanically or story wise to make it GI Joe, to take Achtung Cthulhu and Joeify it?
I'm kind of wishing I'd gone back and listened to the Joe episode probably isn't released yet. That's why I haven't listened to it.
That's right.
So I can't have gone back and listened to it. No, I think we've covered everything. I think we've got the kind of bits of the pulpy nature in the infight within Cobra, the mainly military bent rather than the Cthulhu sort of bent on it.
Right.
We've got ideas for the vehicle and some of the cool gadgets and tech stuff, which a lot of that is, look, you just have to stat it. or you have stuff be truths. You know, a jetpack doesn't need rules. A jetpack is a truth that says you can fly.
That's a really good point.
So, you know, like, you know, a fancy breathing apparatus diving suit, again, is a truth that says you can breathe underwater. You don't need, for a
Wow,
lot of equipment.
That's a
you
really
use
good
truths.
point. That makes your life much easier.
I mean,
There's
I
just
saw that in,
there's no point.
it's one of those things, you know, and we're not biggest fans of it, but in one of the Fate games where it was trying to be a bit crunchier, they did actually still say, having said that, for a huge chunk of equipment, you can just have this particular thing be a, whatever they call it in Fate, you know, it's not called tags, but you know what I mean? Actually, in Fate, that wouldn't necessarily work half the time, because it in Fate, any, like, oh, it's an aspect, isn't it? Gives you like +2 on a roll. I actually, the fact that they've given you this very straightforward thing for a truth, this is why it's better. Consider it's a tagged on rule. I'll never not think of truths as, or traits as tagged on rules, because the first couple didn't have it. And I didn't even know it was in Star Trek. I just I glossed over it completely. But the fact they give you this very easy codified thing, a truth makes an action easier, harder, possible, or impossible.
It's a broad
which
range.
just suddenly then you have a whole bunch of things where, you know, a particular gadget, just for a lot of gadgets, they can just be a truth because they do one of those things.
Yep.
I have a you know, a camouflage field that gives me +1, that lowers the difficulty of stealth checks by 1, or it lowers it increases the difficulty of observation checks to see me by 1. Huge chunks of equipment can just be covered by using truths.
Yep. You know, here I'm going to put a link in the show notes to this, but I found a website here while we were talking called 3djoes.com. That's number 3djoes.com, and it has welcome to the GI Joe yearbook, a visual index of carded figures. These are the things that I had. So like if you click on one of them, laser rifle trooper, and you scroll down, it has a picture of the back, the front and the back of the card.
Cool.
And so it has laser rifle trooper, codename Flash, and it has he's from Lodi, California. Who knew?
Oh, I know what you mean now. Yeah, it's the original ones where all of the models were just green.
Yeah,
so in fact, they all look like Stalker.
But what it has, though, it lists Flash is highly skilled in many aspects of electronic technology and is capable of equipment repair in the field, specialized education, electronics school, chemical school, covert electronics, qualified expert, M16, M19A11, and the XMLR-1A, the shoulder-fired laser rifle. So you have descriptions of all the original Joes from 1982 forward, all the toys. Yeah, when Snake Eyes was just the Commando, and then on the back of the card, his code name was Snake Eyes. So if you're looking for information about the Joes, the original Joes, the real American hero Joes, I'll put the link in the show notes. You could just turn there, and there's your character generation encyclopedia to which you can turn and make sense of all this stuff.
Good find.
And it has vehicles. Woo! Yeah. Oh my gosh. It has the Flak, the Hal, the Jump, the Mobat, which was the tank, the Vamp, which was the cool Jeep with the double machine gun on the top. I had that. Yeah. There you go. So you got everything. You got everything. You have Achtung Cthulhu. You're going to rub the serial numbers off. Everything that was green, you're going to paint more like a more modern camouflage and add lots of blue for Cobra.
It's still green.
It's still green. That's true.
It's probably a slightly brighter green, but yeah, it's still green.
Yeah. Yeah, they're all here. Cool. Anything else that we need to add to this before people can go play G.I. Joe with a smoother, more streamlined, easy to understand system?
I was going to say, we don't know it's smoother or more streamlined. It's definitely easier to understand because having tried to read the other thing.
You know what, though? To me,
easy to understand.
If you're reading something, if you're reading the rules and they're not making sense, you're stumbling over them. How long is it going to take to learn them so that you're not stumbling over them at the table?
Yeah.
So screw it.
Also, this is not a level-based system, which is a shocking idea for G.I. Joe.
Yeah.
Or Transformers.
Yep. All right. So we're good. Yo, Joe.
Yo, Joe.
Or Cobra. Did you ever see the I'll end with this. Did you ever see the episode with the like the Cobra R&R facility? Like it was either in the Arctic or the Antarctic. It was some underground facility where the Cobra troopers could go relax and watch, like hang out. It was like their R&R facility. But of course, all the Cobra troopers were all in their Cobra uniforms with their everywhere they went. Everywhere they went, they're dressed up in their Cobra digs. Where'd you find that episode? Anyway. All right, cool. Thank you so much for listening. You can visit our show's homepage at anchor.fm/fluffncrunch. That's FLUFFNCRUNCH. We would really appreciate feedback and reviews on whatever podcasting platform you're listening to this on. Thanks so much.